Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Foundations of Glass. Gabriel Harlow stared at the architectural plans spread across his desk, the skyline of Boston visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office. At 52, he'd built Harlow Construction from nothing into one of the Northeast's premier development firms. Not bad for a kid who grew up in a trailer park in rural Pennsylvania. "Mr. Harlow, your wife called again." His assistant, Teresa, stood in the doorway. "She's asking about the donation to Westridge University." Gabriel nodded without looking up from the plans. "Tell her I'll handle it when I get home." The Westridge donation had become a daily point of contention. His daughter Kimberly's early application deadline was approaching, and his wife, Veronica, had been pressuring him to increase their planned contribution. Kimberly was set on Westridge. Nothing else would do, and Veronica had made it clear that failure wasn't an option. When Gabriel pulled into the circular driveway of their Beacon Hill mansion that evening, he felt the familiar weight settle onto his shoulders. The house, a 19th century brownstone he'd personally renovated, had once been his pride, a symbol of how far he'd come. Now it felt like a beautifully decorated prison. He found Veronica in the kitchen, typing furiously on her phone. At 48, she remained strikingly beautiful, her blonde hair expensively maintained, her figure kept trim through rigorous daily workouts with her personal trainer, David. "There you are," she said without looking up. "Did you call Howard about increasing the donation?" Gabriel poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey. "I told you, 400,000 is already excessive." Veronica's manicured nails stopped their tapping. "Blake and Patricia Thornton are donating $1 million to get their son in." "$1 million, Gabriel." "The Thorntons can afford to set money on fire," Gabriel replied. "Besides, Kimberly's grades and extracurriculars should speak for themselves." "Don't be naive," Veronica snapped. "Dean Landry made it very clear at the benefit last month that Westridge expects major donors' children to become legacy students. It's how the world works." Dean Philip Landry. The name alone made Gabriel's jaw tighten. The academic had ingratiated himself with Boston's elite, including Veronica, who now sat on 3 university committees that Landry chaired. "Where's Kimberly?" Gabriel asked, changing the subject. "Upstairs, stressed about her admission essay." "Which she wouldn't be if you'd just make the damn call." Gabriel sighed and headed upstairs, passing his younger daughter Abigail's room. Unlike her sister, 16-year-old Abby was curled up with a book, her dark hair, like his, falling around her face. She had his thoughtful nature, too. Sometimes Gabriel wondered if she was the only person in this house who actually saw him. "Hey, Dad," she said, looking up. "Hey, kiddo. Everything okay?" Abby hesitated. Mom and Kim were fighting again. "About the college stuff." "What about it?" Abby shrugged. Kim was on the phone with someone. She seemed upset that something wasn't falling into place as promised. Then Mom came in and they started whispering. Gabriel felt that familiar prickle at the base of his neck, the one that had kept him alive during his 4 tours with the Army Rangers before he'd started his civilian life, the one that told him something wasn't right. "Thanks for telling me," he said quietly. "Get some sleep." Gabriel continued down the hall to Kimberly's room, knocking on the door emblazoned with a "Keep Out" sign. "What?" came the irritated response. Gabriel entered to find his 18-year-old daughter surrounded by crumpled paper, her laptop open to a half-written essay. "Just checking in on the application," he said. Kimberly didn't look up. "Mom said you're being difficult about the donation." "I'm being reasonable about the donation," he corrected. $400,000 is significant. "The Thorntons are not us," Gabriel interrupted. "Your mother seems to forget that I built this company brick by brick. I don't throw money around to impress people." Kimberly finally looked at him, her blue eyes, so like her mother's, cold and dismissive. "Whatever. Dean Landry already basically promised Mom I'd get in." Gabriel's neck prickled again. "Is that so? And why would he do that?" "Because Mom's important to the university," Kimberly said with a shrug. "She's been working with him on like everything. She practically lives at his office these days." Gabriel nodded slowly. "I'm sure she does." That night, while Veronica slept, Gabriel sat in his home office reviewing bank statements. Over the past 6 months, Veronica had transferred nearly $80,000 from their joint account to her personal one in increments just small enough to avoid triggering his notification alerts. The transfers always came after her committee meetings. Gabriel picked up his phone and called a number he hadn't used in years. "It's Harlow," he said when the line connected. "I need your services again." Chapter 2. Shadows and Whispers. Ray Booker had been Gabriel's spotter in Afghanistan, and now he ran a private security firm that occasionally veered into investigation work for the right clients. Within a week, he delivered a manila envelope to Gabriel's office. "It's all there," Ray said, his weathered face grim. "Sorry, brother." Inside were photos of Veronica and Dean Philip Landry entering his private campus residence, embracing in his car, dining at a secluded restaurant in Provincetown. The timestamps showed a pattern going back nearly 18 months. "There's more," Ray said, pointing to a second set of documents. "Landry's been using his position to solicit donations from parents, but only about half of that money reaches university accounts. The rest disappears into offshore accounts." Gabriel stared at the evidence. "And Veronica appears to be involved. She's been attending exclusive donor meetings that Landry hosts at his vacation home in Vermont. Based on financial records, she's received at least $200,000 in kickbacks." Gabriel thought of Kimberly's words. Dean Landry already basically promised Mom I'd get in. "What about my daughter's application?" Ray hesitated. "There's evidence that Landry has already decided to reject her application, despite what he's telling your wife. According to emails we recovered, he told the admissions committee to place her on the definite rejection list 3 months ago. Why? If Veronica is involved in his schemes, it appears to be leverage. Keep stringing your wife along, keep the money flowing, and then use the rejection to create a crisis. From their communications, they expected you to throw more money at the problem." Gabriel's face remained impassive, but Ray recognized the cold fury in his old commander's eyes. "There's one more thing," Ray added. "Your daughter Kimberly has been aware of the affair for at least 6 months. There are text messages between her and her mother discussing it." Gabriel absorbed this final betrayal in silence. "What do you want to do?" Ray asked finally. Gabriel stood and walked to the window. "I need time to think, but I want to keep watching them. Every move, every call, every meeting. And the university scam? We have enough to go to the authorities." "Not yet," Gabriel said. "I want to understand exactly how deep this goes." As Ray left, Gabriel pulled out a small notebook from his desk. It contained names and numbers of people from his past, people who owed him favors, people with specialized skills, people who operated in worlds Veronica couldn't imagine he had access to. That night at dinner, Gabriel observed his family with new eyes. Veronica chatted about university events. Kimberly complained about her application stress, and only Abby seemed to notice his unusual silence. "Is everything okay, Dad?" she asked as he helped her with calculus homework after dinner. Gabriel considered his younger daughter. "Abby, if you knew someone was doing something wrong, would you tell them to stop or let them face the consequences?" Abby thought for a moment. "I guess it depends on whether they knew what they were doing was wrong. And if they definitely knew, then maybe they need to face consequences," she said quietly. "Otherwise, how do they learn?" Gabriel nodded. "That's what I think too." The next day, Gabriel met with his company's legal team and his personal attorney, making subtle but significant changes to his business holdings and personal assets. By the weekend, he had secured what mattered most from the storm he knew was coming. He received a text from Ray. "V meeting with divorce attorney Fisher today. She's moving pieces." So Veronica was preparing for war. Gabriel wasn't surprised. What did surprise him was how little pain he felt. Just cold determination to ensure that those who had betrayed him would not enjoy the fruits of their deception. Later that evening, Gabriel overheard Veronica on the phone in her study. "Yes, Philip, I've spoken with Fisher. He says with the evidence of Gabriel's negligence toward Kimberly's education and our marriage, we can push for 70% of the assets. Yes, I know the rejection letter needs to arrive first. It will devastate him and make him more likely to settle quickly. Of course, Kimberly knows what to say." Gabriel retreated silently from the door. The pieces were falling into place in his mind, A rejection engineered to create maximum drama, followed by divorce papers and demands for his life's work. They had underestimated him badly. Chapter 3. The Breaking Point. 3 weeks later, the Westridge University envelope arrived. Gabriel, having been forewarned by sources he placed inside the admissions office, was working from home that day. Kimberly snatched the large envelope from a mail, her excitement turning to confusion as she opened it. "This can't be right," she whispered, reading the letter. "This has to be a mistake." Veronica rushed over. "What is it? What happened?" "I got rejected," Kimberly said, her voice rising. "They rejected me." Veronica grabbed the letter, her face paling as she read it. Her eyes darted to Gabriel, who sat calmly at the kitchen counter reviewing blueprints. "This is your fault," Kimberly screamed, storming over to Gabriel and throwing the rejection letter at him. "You're such a disappointment." Gabriel calmly picked up the letter and read it, though he already knew its contents. "I'm sorry, Kimberly. I know how much you wanted this." "Sorry doesn't fix this," she yelled. "You didn't donate enough. You didn't care enough. Now my life is ruined." Veronica placed a comforting arm around Kimberly, her eyes cold as she stared at Gabriel. "She's right, you know. Mom's right. You ruined everything." Gabriel folded the letter neatly and handed it back to Kimberly. "Perhaps Dean Landry can explain the decision, given how close you two are." A flicker of panic crossed Veronica's face. "What is that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," Gabriel said mildly. "Just that you work on so many committees together." Veronica's jaw tightened. "Kim, go upstairs. I need to speak to your father." Once Kimberly had stormed out, Veronica's demeanor changed completely. "I want a divorce," she said flatly. "Before next Monday." "That's rather sudden," Gabriel remarked. "Don't play stupid. Our marriage has been over for years. I've already spoken with my attorney. You'll be receiving papers tomorrow." She smiled thinly. "Fisher thinks I deserve at least 2/3 of everything. Given your neglect." Gabriel stood slowly. "Neglect? Your constant work, your failure to properly support Kimberly's education, your emotional distance." Veronica ticked off on her fingers. "Fisher says we have a very strong case." "I see," Gabriel said quietly. "As you wish." Veronica blinked, clearly surprised by his calm acceptance. "That's it? No argument? What would be the point?" Gabriel asked. "You've clearly made up your mind." Suspicion crept into Veronica's expression. "What are you planning, Gabriel?" "Planning? Nothing. You want a divorce by Monday, you'll have it." He gathered his blueprints. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do." As Gabriel walked away, he heard Veronica immediately dialing her phone. "Philip? Something's wrong. He's too calm. I need to move faster." In his office, Gabriel made a call of his own. "Ray, it's time. Activate everything." Over the next 5 days, Gabriel appeared to be the model of cooperation. He met with Veronica's shark of a divorce attorney without bringing his own counsel, nodded agreeably at the outrageous demands, and signed preliminary paperwork without argument. Meanwhile, he moved methodically through his own plans. Calls were made, documents delivered, funds transferred through untraceable channels. On Sunday night, he packed a small bag. "Where are you going?" Veronica demanded when she saw him heading for the door. "You wanted me out by Monday," Gabriel replied. "It's almost Monday. The papers aren't finalized yet. I'm giving you what you want, Veronica. Isn't that enough?" As Gabriel pulled out of the driveway, he glanced back at the house. Abby stood at her window, watching him. He gave her a small nod, which she returned. She knew to be ready. Monday morning dawned bright and clear. At exactly 10 a.m., a black Mercedes pulled up outside the Harlow residence. A tall man in an impeccable suit emerged, carrying a slim leather briefcase. He rang the doorbell. Veronica answered, frowning at the stranger. "Can I help you?" "Mrs. Harlow?" "I'm Calvin Reed, Mr. Harlow's attorney. I have documents for Kimberly Harlow." His voice was professionally detached. "I'll take those," Veronica said, reaching for the briefcase. "I'm afraid my instructions are to deliver them directly to Kimberly," Calvin replied smoothly. Mr. Harlow was quite specific. "Mom? Who is it?" Kimberly appeared behind her mother, eyes red from crying about her rejection. "I have documents for you from your father," Calvin explained, opening the briefcase and extracting a thick envelope. He asked that you review them immediately. Kimberly took the envelope with a scowl. Whatever. More disappointment, I'm sure. She tore it open in the foyer, pulling out a stack of papers. As she began to read, her face went from anger to confusion to shock. The color drained from her cheeks, and her hands began to shake. Kim, what is it? Veronica demanded. Kimberly looked up at her mother, horror in her eyes. Then her knees buckled, and she collapsed to the floor, the papers scattering around her. What on earth? Veronica bent to gather the documents, her own face whitening as she saw what they contained. She looked up at Calvin Reed, who watched impassively. What has he done? Calvin checked his watch. If you'll turn on the news, Mrs. Harlow, I believe that question is about to be answered. Chapter 4. The Silent Predator. 6 months earlier, Gabriel had felt the first stirrings of suspicion about his wife's activities. The late nights, the sudden interest in university affairs, the secretive phone calls, they triggered the hypervigilance he'd developed during his military service. But Gabriel was not a man who acted on hunches. He needed facts. What Veronica never knew about her husband was that before he became a successful builder, Gabriel Harlow had been Sergeant Gabriel Harrison, one of the most effective special reconnaissance operators in the Rangers. His job had been to infiltrate hostile territory, gather intelligence, and extract without detection, skills that translated surprisingly well to the cutthroat world of high-end real estate development. When Gabriel first met Veronica at a charity gala 20 years ago, he'd been building his company, and she'd been a junior event coordinator with dreams of social climbing. They'd fallen in love, or so he thought, and he had given her the life she'd always wanted. Their daughters came along, and Gabriel had dedicated himself to ensuring they would never know the poverty and uncertainty of his own childhood. Now, as Gabriel sat in the nondescript apartment he'd quietly maintained for years as a private retreat, he reviewed the evidence Ray had gathered about the extent of Veronica and Landry's betrayal. The apartment's walls were covered with photos, financial records, and transcripts of conversations. It resembled the mission planning rooms from his military days. In the center was a whiteboard with key players identified, Veronica and Landry, of course, but also various university board members, wealthy parents, and offshore banking contacts. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Ray entered, followed by Monroe Sullivan, Gabriel's longtime attorney and the only person who knew all his contingency plans. The university audit is complete, Monroe said, placing a thick folder on the table. Just as you suspected, Landry has been running this scheme for nearly 5 years. Over 30 families have paid for admissions, with roughly 60% of the money diverted to private accounts. And the board members? Gabriel asked. 3 were definitely involved, 2 were turning a blind eye, and the rest were genuinely clueless, Ray answered. The president, Andrew Bennett, appears to have been completely in the dark. Gabriel nodded. And my special request? Monroe smiled thinly. We found the original assessments of Kimberly's application. Before Landry interfered, she was actually recommended for admission on her own merits. He personally moved her to the rejection pile. Gabriel's jaw tightened. The betrayal cut even deeper than he'd imagined. Landry had rejected Kimberly not just as leverage against Veronica, but as a deliberate move to hurt an innocent young woman for his own gain. We've also confirmed that Veronica has been siphoning funds from her joint accounts for nearly 3 years, Monroe continued. Almost $1.2 million in total, hidden in an account under her maiden name. What about Kimberly? How involved was she? Gabriel asked, his face betraying nothing of the pain this question caused him. Ray shifted uncomfortably. She knew about the affair from the beginning. There are texts suggesting Landry promised to take care of her future and be her new dad once everything was settled. Gabriel absorbed this silently, then turned to the third whiteboard, which detailed his counterattack. Phase 1 is complete, he said. The assets are secured, and the trust for Abby is untouchable. What about the evidence delivery? Everything is prepared, Monroe confirmed. Calvin will deliver the personal materials to your home tomorrow at 10 a.m. The financial evidence goes to the university board at 10:15, and the press conference by the district attorney is scheduled for 11. Gabriel nodded. And Abby, she'll be picked up from school by Margaret as planned, Ray assured him, referring to Gabriel's sister who lived in Maine. She won't be there for the fallout. Gabriel looked at the clock. In less than 24 hours, the life Veronica had plotted and schemed for would collapse entirely. He felt no joy in this, only a cold certainty that justice would be served. There's one more thing, Ray said hesitantly. We found something you should see. He handed Gabriel a small flash drive. This was in Landry's private files. It's about your father. Gabriel frowned. His father had died of alcoholism when Gabriel was just 14, leaving him to fend for himself until he was old enough to enlist. What could Landry possibly have had on him? The video file showed Landry and Veronica in bed together, but it was their conversation that froze Gabriel's blood. He still has no idea? Landry asked, stroking Veronica's hair. None, Veronica laughed. Gabriel's so proud of building himself up from nothing, from his tragic childhood with an alcoholic dad. He never questioned why I suggested Westridge for Kimberly. Because his father was groundskeeper there for 20 years, Landry smirked. Before I fired him for drinking on the job, which drove him to drink more and eventually killed him, Veronica finished. Poetic that his granddaughter wants to attend so badly. And he never made the connection to the name? Gabriel's father was Harrison, not Harlow. Gabriel changed his name when he enlisted, wanted a fresh start. He has no idea you're the man who destroyed his father. Gabriel closed the laptop, his expression unreadable. I'm sorry, Ray said quietly. We can adjust the plan if... No, Gabriel interrupted. This changes nothing about tomorrow, but it does change what comes after. His friends exchanged worried glances, but Gabriel had already turned back to the white bards, making a small addition to the third phase of his plan. Across town, Veronica was finalizing her own plans, unaware of the trap closing around her. She met Landry at their usual hotel, Celebration champagne already on ice. Fisher says Gabriel's total capitulation is suspicious, she told Landry as they lounged in the hotel suite. He thinks Gabriel might be hiding assets. Landry dismissed her concerns with a wave. My sources in his company say he's been distracted, unfocused. The man's broken, Veronica. He built his whole identity around being the perfect husband and father. Without that, he's nothing. Still, I've never seen him give up without a fight. He knows he's lost. By this time next week, you'll have control of most of his assets. I'll have handled the university's investigation into the rejection, and we can start planning our future. Landry refilled their glasses. To us. Veronica smiled and clinked her glass against his. To us. Neither noticed the tiny camera hidden in the smoke detector, recording every word. Chapter 5. The Architect's Design. On Sunday evening, as Gabriel packed his small bag at home, Abby knocked softly on his bedroom door. Are you really leaving, Dad? She asked, her eyes worried. Gabriel sat on the edge of the bed and patted the space beside him. Just for a little while. You're going to stay with Aunt Margaret for a few days. Because of Mom and Dean Landry? Abby asked quietly. Gabriel stilled. What do you know about that? I'm not stupid, Dad. Mom's been seeing him for ages. Kim knows too. She thinks it's great because he promised to help her get into Westridge. Abby's voice turned bitter. Not that it worked out. Gabriel studied his younger daughter. Why didn't you tell me? I tried in my way. But you work so much, and when you're home, you always seem tired. Abby looked down at her hands. And I was afraid. Of what? That if I told you, everything would fall apart. A tear slipped down her cheek. But it's falling apart anyway, isn't it? Gabriel put his arm around her shoulders. Some things are falling apart, but sometimes we need to tear down before we can rebuild. Abby looked up at him. Mom said you'd lose everything in the divorce, that you'd sign papers already. A small smile touched Gabriel's lips. Your mother sees what she wants to see. What's going to happen tomorrow? The truth will come out, Gabriel said simply. About a lot of things. Will we be okay? You and me. Gabriel hugged her tightly. We will always be okay, Abby. That's a promise. Across town, in his Spartan apartment, Gabriel made his final preparations. The evidence he'd gathered went far beyond Veronica and Landry's affair. He'd uncovered a network of corruption that Landry had built over years, falsified admissions, embezzled donations, bribes, and blackmail. Working with carefully selected contacts in law enforcement, Gabriel had constructed a case that was now poised to explode into the public eye. But the official investigation was only part of his plan. Gabriel had learned long ago that true power lay not in wealth or status, but in knowledge and preparation. While Veronica thought she was stripping him of his assets, she had no idea that Gabriel had spent the last 5 years quietly building a separate business entity under a different name, transferring ownership of his most valuable properties through a complex series of legal maneuvers that even Fisher, for all his shark-like instincts, would never unravel. The divorce papers Gabriel had so agreeably signed were worthless, carefully worded by Monroe to appear legitimate, while containing subtle legal flaws that would render them unenforceable. By the time Veronica discovered this, the rest of his plan would be well underway. But Gabriel's most devastating weapon was information. He documented every aspect of Veronica and Landry's affair, their financial schemes, and, most damning, their deliberate plot to use Kimberly as a pawn. This was the evidence Calvin would deliver tomorrow, ensuring that Kimberly understood exactly how her mother and future dad had manipulated her. Gabriel harbored no illusions that this would turn Kimberly back to his side. She had chosen her path, but she deserved to know the truth about the people she had chosen over him. As for Landry, Gabriel's revenge went deeper. The man had not only stolen his wife and corrupted his daughter, but had apparently played a role in his father's downfall decades earlier. This was a debt Gabriel intended to collect in full. Monday morning arrived, and Gabriel watched the events unfold from the command center he'd established in his apartment. Multiple screens showed news feeds, security camera footage from his home, and a live feed from the university board's emergency meeting room, where Monroe was currently presenting evidence of Landry's corruption. At exactly 10 a.m., Calvin Reed delivered the envelope to the Harlow residence. Gabriel watched on the security feed as Kimberly opened it and collapsed. The documents contained not only evidence of her mother's betrayal, but transcripts of conversations in which Landry and Veronica discussed using Kimberly's college dreams as leverage against Gabriel. At 10:15, the university board received their own devastating dossier. Gabriel had ensured that President Bennett received a private briefing an hour earlier, giving him time to prepare for the crisis about to engulf the institution. At 10:30, Veronica began frantically calling Landry, only to find his phone going straight to voicemail. By then, he was already in the president's office, facing the evidence of his crimes. At 11 a.m., as promised, the district attorney held a press conference announcing a major investigation into admissions fraud, bribery, and embezzlement at Westridge University, with Dean Philip Landry named as the primary suspect. By noon, Veronica had called her attorney 17 times, growing increasingly desperate as she realized her carefully constructed future was disintegrating. And at 1 p.m., when she attempted to access the divorce settlement fund she expected to be available, she discovered that all accounts were frozen pending investigation into her role in Landry's schemes. Gabriel watched it all unfold with the detached focus of a master strategist seeing his plans executed to perfection. But this was just the beginning. Chapter 6, Fault Lines. The headlines hit like bombs. Westridge University dean arrested in massive admissions scandal. Prominent Boston socialite implicated in university corruption case. Millions in donations misappropriated. Dozens of admissions compromised. By late afternoon, Veronica had locked herself in the master bedroom, refusing to answer the barrage of calls from former friends and social acquaintances suddenly desperate to distance themselves from her. Kimberly, shattered by the revelations in Gabriel's documents, had fled to a friend's house. Only Abby remained calm, picked up from school by her aunt as planned, safely away from the media circus that had descended on the Harlow residence. At 4 p.m., Gabriel's phone rang. The screen showed Veronica's name. "Where are you?" she demanded, her voice shaking with rage. "What have you done?" "I've done nothing but expose the truth," Gabriel replied evenly. "They're saying I'll be charged as an accomplice. Fisher has dropped me as a client. Our accounts are frozen. Not our accounts, Gabriel corrected. Your accounts. The ones you've been funneling money into for years. Veronica fell silent for a moment. How long have you known? Long enough. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? That I wouldn't protect myself? You've destroyed everything, she screamed. My reputation, my future. You destroyed those yourself, Veronica. I just made sure everyone could see what you'd done. What about Kimberly? Did you think about what this would do to her? Gabriel's voice hardened. Kimberly chose her side when she decided to participate in your schemes. She's 18, old enough to understand consequences. You heartless bastard. You've always been cold. Is that the story you're telling yourself? Gabriel asked mildly. That I drove you to betray me? To use our daughter as a pawn? To steal from me for years? I want to talk. Face to face, Veronica said, her tone suddenly shifting to something almost conciliatory. We can still fix this, Gabriel. For the girl's sake. There's nothing to fix, Veronica. It's over. You can't just throw away 20 years of marriage. I didn't, Gabriel said. You did. Goodbye, Veronica. He ended the call and turned to Ray, who had been monitoring the conversation. She'll try to find me. Make sure that doesn't happen. Ray nodded. What about Landry? Gabriel checked his watch. He should be enjoying his first night in custody. Has he made his call yet? To his attorney, yes. But get this, the attorney's dropping him too. Seems no one wants to be associated with this case. Gabriel allowed himself a small smile. Perfect. And a university? President Bennett has called an all-hands meeting for tomorrow morning. Word is they're going to announce a complete overhaul of the admissions process and a full audit of all donations for the past 5 years. Good. What about the other families involved? Most are cooperating with authorities, claiming they were pressured or didn't understand what was happening. Ray snorted. Rich people never think the rules apply to them. Gabriel turned back to the monitors, watching as reporters continued to swarm outside his home. And the special arrangement? In place. Subject will arrive at the specified location at 9 p.m. Gabriel nodded. I'll be there. At precisely 9 p.m., Gabriel sat alone in a private room at the Harborside Hotel. The door opened, and Andrew Bennett, president of Westridge University, entered. Mr. Harlow, Bennett said, extending his hand. Thank you for meeting me. Gabriel gestured to the chair opposite him. Please sit. Bennett looked exhausted, the weight of the scandal evident in the new lines on his face. I want to personally apologize for what happened with your daughter's application. We're reviewing all of Landry's rejections, and we'll be sending out new decision letters by the end of the week. I appreciate that, Gabriel said, but that's not why I asked you here. I assume not. Bennett sighed. Your attorney mentioned you had a proposition for the university. Gabriel slid a folder across the table. Inside you'll find documentation of a trust I've established. $100 million to be used specifically for scholarships for students from underprivileged backgrounds. Bennett's eyes widened. That's extremely generous, but I'm not finished, Gabriel interrupted. The trust comes with conditions. First, the money is contingent on a complete restructuring of the admissions department, with new oversight protocols that I'll help design. That's unusual, but given the circumstances, I think the board would agree. Second, I want a formal investigation into Philip Landry's hiring practices over the past decade, particularly his termination decisions. Bennett frowned slightly. May I ask why? Personal reasons, Gabriel said flatly. The information you uncover will be provided to me in full. I see. Bennett studied Gabriel carefully. And the third condition? The trust will be named after my father, Walter Harrison. He worked as groundskeeper at Westridge for 20 years before Landry fired him. Understanding dawned on Bennett's face. Harrison, I remember Walter. He was let go before I became president. I had no idea he was your father. Few people do. I changed my name when I enlisted. Gabriel's expression remained impassive. Do we have an agreement? Bennett considered the offer. $100 million endowment would go a long way toward repairing the damage to Westridge's reputation. And the conditions, while unusual, weren't unreasonable given the circumstances. We do, Bennett said finally. I'll present it to the board tomorrow, but I can't imagine they'll refuse. Good. Gabriel stood, indicating the meeting was over. My attorney will be in touch with the details. As Bennett left, Gabriel allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The Harrison Scholarship Fund would ensure his father's name lived on at the institution that had cast him aside, while simultaneously serving as a permanent reminder to the university of the corruption they had harbored. Meanwhile, across town, Philip Landry sat in a holding cell. His world collapsed around him. His attorney had abandoned him. His assets were frozen, and the evidence against him was overwhelming. As night fell, a guard approached his cell. "Landry, you have a visitor." Landry looked up hopefully. "My new attorney?" The guard smirked. "Didn't say. Just said it was important." Landry was led to a private consultation room, where a man he'd never seen before waited. "Who are you?" Landry demanded. The man smiled coldly. "My name isn't important. I'm here representing Gabriel Harlow." Landry paled. "What does he want?" "He wanted me to deliver a message." The man slid a photo across the table. "Do you recognize this man?" Landry glanced down at the old photograph of a groundskeeper in a Westridge uniform. "Vaguely. What about him?" "His name was Walter Harrison. You fired him 15 years ago for drinking on a job." "So, what does this have to do with anything?" "Walter Harrison was Gabriel Harlow's father. You destroyed his life, and now his son has destroyed yours." The man stood. "Mr. Harlow wanted you to know that he considers this the first installment of the debt you owe him." Landry's face drained of color. "First installment? What does that mean?" The man smiled again, cold and professional. "It means Mr. Harlow is just getting started." Chapter 7. The Veil Lifts. 2 days after the scandal broke, Gabriel sat across from Kimberly in a quiet corner of a cafe, far from media attention. She looked terrible, eyes red-rimmed, hair unwashed, wearing the same clothes she'd fled the house in. "Why did you want to see me?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "To make sure you understand what happens next," Gabriel replied, sliding a slim folder across the table. "Inside you'll find documents for a trust I've established in your name. It contains enough money for you to complete your education at any university that will accept you, plus living expenses for 5 years. Kimberly stared at the folder without touching it. "Why would you do this?" "After everything." "Because you're my daughter," Gabriel said simply. "But make no mistake, this is the last thing you'll ever receive from me." "You're disowning me?" Kimberly's voice cracked. "You disowned me long before I took any action. You knew about your mother's affair. You participated in their plans against me, and you were eager to replace me with a man who was using you as a pawn." Gabriel's voice remained calm, but his eyes were cold. "The trust is irrevocable. You'll receive the money regardless of what happens next. But our relationship is over." Tears spilled down Kimberly's cheeks. "Dad, please, I didn't understand what was happening." Mom said. "You understood enough," Gabriel interrupted. "You're an adult, Kimberly, and adults face consequences for their choices. Where am I supposed to go? What am I supposed to do? That's entirely up to you. The house is being sold. Your mother will likely face charges. My suggestion would be to use the trust to start over somewhere new, somewhere away from the scandal." "What about Abby?" "Abby will remain with me." She made different choices. Kimberly finally reached for the folder with trembling hands. "I never thought you could be so cold." "No," Gabriel agreed. "You never really knew me at all." As he stood to leave, Kimberly looked up at him. "Do you hate me?" Gabriel paused. "No, Kimberly. I don't hate you. I just don't trust you. And in my world, trust once broken can never be repaired." He walked away, leaving his oldest daughter staring after him, finally understanding the man she had so catastrophically underestimated. Meanwhile, Veronica sat in Monroe Sullivan's office, facing the grim reality of her situation. "The prosecutors are offering a deal," Monroe explained. "In exchange for testimony against Landry and the other university officials involved, they'll recommend probation instead of prison time." "And if I don't cooperate?" Veronica asked. "Then they'll pursue the maximum penalties for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. You're looking at 8 to 10 years. Veronica closed her eyes. "What about the divorce?" "There won't be a divorce," Monroe said flatly. "The papers you thought Gabriel signed contained fatal legal flaws that render them invalid. And given your current legal situation, I wouldn't recommend pursuing it further." So I'm still married to him? After everything? Technically, yes. Though I wouldn't count on reconciliation. Monroe's tone was dry. As for your financial situation, all joint assets have been frozen pending investigation. The funds you transferred to your private accounts have been seized as evidence. What am I supposed to live on? Gabriel has authorized a monthly stipend that will cover basic necessities. It's more generous than you deserve, in my opinion. Veronica's carefully maintained composure finally cracked. He planned all of this, didn't he? He knew exactly what was happening and set a trap for all of us. Monroe regarded her coolly. Mr. Harlow is a methodical man. He gives people every chance to do the right thing. But when betrayed, he ensures consequences are appropriate. Tell him I want to talk. Please. I'll convey your request, but I wouldn't hold your breath. As Monroe had predicted, Gabriel had no interest in speaking with Veronica. Instead, he focused on rebuilding his life. He and Abby moved into a new home in a different part of Boston, away from the memories and the continuing media attention. The story had become national news, with Gabriel portrayed alternately as a wronged husband taking justifiable revenge or a ruthless operator who had destroyed his own family. Gabriel ignored the coverage, concentrating instead on the next phase of his plan. Landry remained in custody, unable to make the substantial bail set by a judge who had reviewed the overwhelming evidence against him. The university investigation was uncovering more corruption by the day, and Veronica's deal with prosecutors was proceeding, ensuring she would provide damning testimony against her former lover. But Gabriel wasn't satisfied. Justice through official channels was only part of what he sought. The rest would come through other means. 3 weeks after the scandal broke, Gabriel received a call from Andrew Bennett. We've completed the investigation into Landry's hiring and firing practices as you requested, the university president said. The results are disturbing. I'm listening, Gabriel replied. It appears Landry systematically removed employees who questioned his methods or who he perceived as threats. Your father wasn't fired for drinking on the job. He was fired because he witnessed Landry accepting an envelope for a parent outside normal channels. I suspected as much, Gabriel said quietly. There's more. After your father was terminated, Landry ensured he couldn't find employment at any other educational institution in the region. He effectively blacklisted a man who had given 20 years of loyal service to Westridge. Gabriel's grip tightened on the phone. Thank you for confirming this. The board has voted unanimously to approve the Harrison Scholarship Fund. With all your conditions accepted, Bennett continued. We're also establishing a review committee to examine all personnel decisions made during Landry's tenure, with the aim of making amends where possible. Too late for my father, but I appreciate the gesture, Gabriel said. Is there anything else? Yes, actually. We've reconsidered Kimberly's application based on her actual merits, without Landry's interference. She qualified for admission on her own achievements. We'd like to offer her a place in next year's class, if she's interested. Gabriel paused, considering. That should be Kimberly's decision. I'll make sure she receives the offer. After ending the call, Gabriel sat in silence for a long moment. Then he dialed Ray. It's time for the final phase, he said simply. The next morning, Philip Landry was led into a courtroom for a bail review hearing. His new attorney, a public defender overwhelmed with cases, had barely spoken with him. As Landry took his seat, he noticed a man in the gallery staring directly at him. Gabriel Harlow. Fear coursed through Landry as he remembered the message delivered to his cell. Mr. Harlow is just getting started. The hearing proceeded, with prosecutors arguing against any reduction in bail given the flight risk and the continuing discovery of evidence. Landry's attorney made a perfunctory argument about his client's ties to the community, but the judge seemed unmoved. Then, just as the judge was about to rule, a court officer approached the bench and handed him a document. The judge frowned as he read it, then looked up at Landry with new scrutiny. Counsel approach, he ordered. The prosecutors and Landry's attorney huddled at the bench for a tense conversation. When they returned to their tables, Landry's attorney looked shell-shocked. Your Honor, the lead prosecutor announced, we have just received credible information that Mr. Landry has been making arrangements to flee the country if released. We're prepared to present evidence of passport applications under an alias and communications with contacts in countries without extradition treaties. Landry gasped. That's absurd. I've done no such thing. The judge silenced him with a glare. Given this new information, bail is denied. The defendant will remain in custody until trial. As Landry was led away in shock, he looked again at Gabriel, who sat impassively in the gallery. Only when their eyes met did Gabriel allow himself the slightest smile. Later that day, in his cell, Landry received another visitor, the same mysterious man who had delivered Gabriel's message. What lies did you tell them? Landry demanded. I never tried to get a fake passport. The man shrugged. Evidence is evidence. It doesn't matter where it comes from or how it was created. What matters is that it's convincing. You're framing me. You're already guilty of numerous crimes, Mr. Landry. This just ensures you won't escape the consequences. The man leaned forward. Mr. Harlow wanted me to tell you something. He said to remind you that his father died alone, broke, and disgraced because of what you did. He wants you to experience the same fate. This is insane. I'll tell the authorities about these threats. Feel free. A desperate man making wild accusations to distract from his own crimes? I'm sure they'll be very sympathetic. The man stood to leave. One last thing. Mr. Harlow says to enjoy prison. He's made sure certain inmates know you're coming. Inmates who don't take kindly to people who manipulate young students. Landry's face went ashen. You can't do this. It's already done. The man knocked for the guard to let him out. Goodbye, Mr. Landry. You've made a very dangerous enemy. Chapter 8. Consequences Rendered. 1 month later, Kimberly stood nervously on the porch of Gabriel's new home. Abby had arranged this meeting, begging their father to give her sister one chance to speak. You have 10 minutes, Gabriel said as he opened the door. He didn't invite her in, instead stepping onto the porch and closing the door behind him. Kimberly had lost weight, and her previously perfect appearance was now subdued. I received the offer from Westridge, she said, and I wanted to thank you. I know you must have had something to do with it. I didn't, Gabriel replied truthfully. The university reviewed your application on its merits. You earned it yourself. Oh, Kimberly seemed surprised. Well, I'm accepting the offer. I'll be starting in the fall. Gabriel nodded. Good, Dad, Kimberly took a deep breath. I'm so sorry. I was stupid and selfish and horrible to you. I believed Mom and because I wanted to, because it was easier than seeing the truth. And what truth is that? That you were the one who really cared about me. That you were the one who always showed up, who built everything we had. Tears filled her eyes, and I threw it back in your face. Gabriel's expression remained neutral. Is that all? No, Kimberly said, wiping her eyes. I want another chance. I want to be your daughter again. For a long moment, Gabriel said nothing. When he finally spoke, his voice was level. Trust is like glass, Kimberly. Once shattered, it can never be put back together exactly as it was. There will always be cracks, always be missing pieces. I know, but I don't trust you, Gabriel continued. I don't trust your motives or your loyalty, and I don't foresee that changing. Fresh tears spilled down Kimberly's cheeks. So that's it? We're done forever because of one mistake. It wasn't one mistake. It was hundreds of choices over many months. Choices you made as an adult, with full knowledge of what you were doing. Gabriel's tone remained calm. The trust will continue to provide for your education and basic needs. You'll have the opportunity to build a life for yourself. But that life won't include me. What about Abby? Are you keeping me from her too? Abby can make her own decisions about your relationship. I won't interfere with that. But she lives with me, and that won't change. Kimberly took a step toward him. Please, Dad. Everyone makes mistakes. Can't you forgive me? Forgiveness and trust are not the same thing, Gabriel replied. I don't wish you ill, Kimberly. But some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. He turned and went back inside, closing the door firmly behind him. Inside, Abby waited, her expression hopeful. How did it go? Gabriel shook his head slightly. Some wounds are too deep to heal, Abby. She's really sorry, Dad. I believe her. I'm sure she is, now that she's experienced the consequences of her actions. Gabriel placed a gentle hand on his younger daughter's shoulder. You can maintain whatever relationship with her you want. That's your choice. But mine is made. Meanwhile, Veronica's cooperation with authorities had led to a plea deal that kept her out of prison but left her financially ruined and socially ostracized. The woman who had once been a fixture of Boston's elite society now lived in a small apartment, supported by the stipend Gabriel provided, just enough to prevent destitution, but far from the luxury she had grown accustomed to. Her attempts to contact Gabriel had all been rebuffed. Monroe had made it clear that while Gabriel would not pursue divorce at present, a calculated decision that prevented her from making any claims on his assets, he considered their marriage over in every meaningful way. As for Landry, his situation had grown increasingly dire. New victims came forward daily, revealing how he had manipulated admissions, coerced donations, and in some cases, sexually harassed students and staff. His trial was still months away, but his reputation was already destroyed beyond repair. What Landry didn't know was that Gabriel had systematically dismantled every friendship, every alliance, and every potential support system the former dean might have called upon. Through a network of operatives and carefully placed information, Gabriel had ensured that Landry was utterly alone in his downfall. 2 months after Landry's arrest, Gabriel received a call from Ray. "It's done," Ray said without preamble. "The offshore accounts have been traced back to him. The feds are adding money laundering and tax evasion to the charges. And the special arrangement in place. Your father's old friend on the prison staff has confirmed that Landry will be housed in the general population, not protective custody, as his attorney requested." Gabriel nodded, though Ray couldn't see it. "Good. Keep me informed." That evening, Gabriel sat in his study reviewing plans for a new development project. His company had not only survived the scandal, but had thrived, as Gabriel's image as a wronged husband taking justified revenge had resonated with many. New investors had appeared, and projects that had been stalled suddenly found approval. A soft knock at the door interrupted his work. Abby entered, carrying 2 mugs of tea. "Thought you might need this," she said, placing one beside him. "Thank you." Gabriel set aside the plans and gave his daughter his full attention. "Everything okay?" Abby sat in the chair opposite his desk. "I saw the news about Mom's plea deal and Mr. Landry's new charges." "Ah, did you do all that? Make sure they wouldn't get away with it?" Gabriel considered his answer carefully. "I made sure the truth came to light. What happened after that was the natural consequence of their actions." Abby studied him with eyes too wise for her 16 years. "Are you going to forgive them? Ever?" "No," Gabriel said simply. "Some betrayals can't be forgiven. Not even Mom, after 20 years of marriage. Especially not after 20 years. The length of time makes the betrayal worse, not better." Abby nodded slowly. "What about Kim?" Gabriel sighed. "That's more complicated. Because she's your daughter? Because she's young. She made terrible choices, but she has time to learn from them." Gabriel's eyes softened slightly. "I don't wish her ill, Abby. I hope she builds a good life. But that life won't include me. That seems harsh. It may seem so. But in my experience, maintaining relationships with people who have betrayed you only invites further betrayal." Gabriel took a sip of his tea. "I prefer clarity. Those I trust, I protect absolutely. Those who betray that trust are removed from my life completely." "Is that how you've always been? Even before all this happened?" Gabriel considered the question. "Perhaps not always, but it's who I am now." Abby stood and came around the desk, giving her father a tight hug. "Well, I'll never betray you. So you're stuck with me forever." Gabriel hugged her back, a rare smile softening his features. "I'm counting on it." Chapter 9. The Architect's Legacy. 1 year later, Philip Landry stood before the judge for sentencing. The trial had been a formality, the evidence against him so overwhelming that even his expensive new attorney, hired with mysteriously sourced funds, couldn't mount an effective defense. He had been found guilty on all counts: fraud, embezzlement, bribery, obstruction of justice, and witness tampering. "Before I pronounce sentence," the judge said, "does the defendant wish to make a statement?" Landry rose shakily. Once impeccably groomed, he now looked haggard and defeated. "Your Honor, I want to express my deepest remorse for my actions. I lost sight of my responsibilities as an educator and— Spare us the performance, Mr. Landry, the judge interrupted. Your remorse appears directly proportional to the likelihood of severe consequences, not to any genuine recognition of the harm you've caused. The judge shuffled the papers before him. Philip Landry, this court sentences you to 12 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole for at least 8 years. Additionally, you are ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $4.3 million to the victims of your schemes. As Landry was led away in handcuffs, he glanced at the gallery and froze. There, watching him passively, sat Gabriel Harlow. Their eyes met briefly before Gabriel rose and walked out, his business concluded. Outside the courthouse, Gabriel found Ray waiting for him. It's done, Gabriel said simply. 12 years is a long time, Ray observed as they walked to the waiting car. Not long enough, Gabriel replied, but it's only part of his sentence. The financial restitution, Gabriel smiled thinly. That, and the knowledge that he'll serve his time in a facility where several inmates have personal grievances against those who abuse positions of authority over young people. I understand they're quite eager to make his acquaintance. Ray glanced at his old friend. You've never told me exactly what happened with your father. No, Gabriel agreed. I haven't. They drove in silence back to Gabriel's office, where a new set of architectural plans awaited his approval. The Harrison Tower would be his most ambitious project yet, a landmark building that would reshape Boston's skyline and cement his legacy in the city. That evening, Gabriel returned home to find Abby cooking dinner, music playing as she moved around the kitchen with the newfound confidence of her 17 years. Smells good, he commented, hanging his coat. Italian. Found a recipe online. Abby turned down the music. How was the sentencing? As expected. Abby studied him. Did it help? Seeing him face justice. Gabriel considered the question. Justice is a complicated concept, Abby. What happened today was punishment, which isn't quite the same thing. But you got what you wanted. I ensured he received the consequences he earned. Gabriel poured himself a glass of water. How was school? Abby let him change the subject. Good. Ms. Patterson wants me to apply for a summer architecture program at MIT. Said I have natural talent. She's right, Gabriel said with pride. We can look at the application this weekend. As they ate dinner, Gabriel's phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. He was about to silence it when something made him answer. Gabriel Harlow. Mr. Harlow, this is Nurse Reynolds at Boston Memorial. I'm calling about your wife, Veronica Harlow. Gabriel frowned. What about her? She's been admitted following a suicide attempt. You're listed as her emergency contact. For a moment, Gabriel said nothing. Then, what's her condition? Stable. She'll recover physically, but the doctors are recommending psychological evaluation and treatment. I see. And why are you calling me specifically? Sir, her insurance was declined. Without coverage, the hospital can only provide emergency stabilization before release. Gabriel understood immediately. The stipend he provided Veronica was enough for basic living expenses, but not for comprehensive health insurance. This call wasn't about her well-being, it was about payment. I'll have my attorney contact the hospital tomorrow regarding finances, Gabriel said coldly. But to be clear, while I'll ensure the bills are paid, I have no interest in visiting or being further involved. Sir, she specifically asked to see you. The doctors think it might be important for her recovery. My involvement would not contribute positively to her recovery. Nurse Reynolds. Good evening. Gabriel hung up, aware of Abby watching him with concern. Mom, she asked quietly. Gabriel nodded. She's in the hospital. She'll be fine. What happened? She made another poor decision. Gabriel's tone made it clear he wouldn't elaborate further. Do you want to visit her? Abby considered this. Not really. Is that terrible? No, it's honest. Gabriel reached across the table and squeezed her hand. We can't heal other people's wounds, Abby, especially when they keep reopening them. Later that night, Gabriel sat in his study reviewing the final numbers from the Harrison Scholarship Fund's first year. 20 students from disadvantaged backgrounds had received full scholarships to Westridge, with mentoring and housing support included. It was perhaps the only truly good thing to come from the whole sordid affair. His phone buzzed with a text from Kimberly. I made Dean's list. Thought you might want to know. Gabriel stared at the message for a long moment before replying. Good work. It wasn't forgiveness or reconciliation, but it was acknowledgement, the most he could offer. The next morning, Gabriel stood at the window of his office, looking out at the city he had helped build. In the distance, construction had begun on the Harrison Tower. His father's name would now grace not only a scholarship fund, but a landmark that would stand for generations. Monroe entered, carrying a folder. The hospital paperwork is complete. Veronica will receive the treatment she needs, but your name has been removed from all documentation. As far as the facility is concerned, you're simply a financial benefactor, not a family member. Thank you, Gabriel said, taking the folder. And the other matter? The divorce papers are prepared, as requested. We can file whenever you're ready. Gabriel nodded. After the new year. Let her get through treatment first. Monroe raised an eyebrow. A surprisingly compassionate decision. Not compassion, Gabriel corrected. Pragmatism. Filing now would only create a new crisis for her to fixate on. Better to wait until she's stable enough to handle it rationally. As you wish. Monroe hesitated. There's one more thing. Russell Landry has apparently been having difficulties in prison. He's requested transfer to protective custody for the third time. So far, all requests have been denied. A cold smile touched Gabriel's lips. How unfortunate for him. Some might say you've taken your revenge far enough, Gabriel. Some might. Gabriel turned back to the window. Those people never had to watch their father drink himself to death after losing everything. Monroe sighed. Just be careful. Revenge has a way of consuming the one who seeks it. This isn't about revenge anymore, Monroe. It's about justice. My father never got his. I'm simply balancing the scales. After Monroe left, Gabriel returned to his desk and pulled out an old photograph. His father in a Westridge University groundskeeper uniform, smiling proudly with a much younger Gabriel beside him. He placed it carefully beside a rendering of the Harrison Tower. We did it, Dad, he said quietly. We built something they can't tear down. His phone rang, Ray calling with updates on their newest project. Gabriel answered, his mind already turning to the future. The past was settled. The debts were paid. Those who had betrayed him had faced their reckoning. Gabriel Harlow had rebuilt his life on his own terms, without forgiveness, without compromise. In the ruins of betrayal, he had constructed something stronger, more resilient, a legacy that would endure long after the pain had faded into memory. And that, he reflected as he discussed plans for his next creation, was the most complete revenge of all. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.